Randy Karraker Show on STL Sports Central, presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours, Brenden Schaeffer. It's a Tuesday. Randy Karraker, great to have you with us. Cardinals opening up a series against the very functional Washington Nationals tonight at the ballpark. They get it in Washington, don't they? They've got it. Seems like they got the baseball thing figured out.
Yeah, who's they? Because they look a little different than they did this time last week, and they're tearing things down from the top down, it would seem. But I don't know. Maybe the timing is good for the Cardinals to be able to catch them in a period of dysfunction and confusion, or maybe not. I don't know. We'll find out this week.
One thing about them is this guy, Jake Irvin, must be pretty good to be 7-3, or he's just getting a ton of run support. He's going against Sonny Gray, and the Cardinals tweaked their rotation for the series. It'll be Gray tonight, Palante tomorrow, Mikolas, I would assume Liberatore on Friday, and then I would assume McGreevy on Saturday. Eric Fedde nowhere to be seen in that rotation, then back to Gray on Sunday. Do you see it that way?
I see it that way, as that's the way that it ought to be. I don't know exactly functionally what the move is to make that happen. I'm okay with Eric Fedde dealing with a little something at this point in time, because I don't think you have to make a permanent move. He was effective before 3 starts ago, but the last 3 starts, he's been completely untenable, and I just don't see how you start him on this homestand. Give him a little bit of time, just kind of bide your time when it comes to Eric Fedde, but no, I don't believe he should be starting before the All-Star break for the Cardinals.
And if you're the Cardinals and you believe the past, last year when he got to St. Louis from the White Sox, a little after this time of year, but it was at the trade deadline, he told the Cardinal brass, even before he pitched, I believe, he said, look, I'm gassed. I'm just out of gas. And I wonder if that's just a thing, if he's only capable of going so far. Cardinals have already paid him $5 million for this year. He's due $2.5 million the rest of the year. I know that they're worried about not having anybody in Triple. They got Zach Plesac sitting down in AAA. They could fit him on 40 man.
I don't know.
Well, but is he going to be any worse than Eric Fedde?
Not than what Fedde's been over his past 3 starts. I guess the idea would be you hope that Fedde could recapture a little bit of what he was doing before, which was better than the underlying numbers suggested. And now it's come back for him in a major way.
And my thing is, I just want to get McGreevy into the rotation.
Yeah,
I don't care how they do it with Fedde. But Mikolas is going to be there. One thing, the big difference between Mikolas is he gave you 6 innings, even though it was terrible, and Fedde gave you less than 2. And
gave you less than 6 outs in the game on Sunday.
Right. So you need somebody, even if they're bad, to give you outs as your number 5 starter. Well, the problem with the Cardinals that they have right now with a guy like Fedde is that he seems bewildered by the whole thing, and it has just completely fallen apart for him in the last 3 weeks or last 3 starts. The other thing you can do is find out if there is any real interest. If you DFA him, you could have somebody take the money off your hands.
Yeah.
Or maybe somebody will express, you aren't going to get much for him. You'll get a lottery ticket for him if you trade him, but you could just have somebody pick him up on waivers and take the money off your hands too.
Yeah, and I think you're at the point in the calendar where it's okay to do that. Like, I understand that Cardinals fans have been fed up, no pun intended, with the back end of the rotation for a while now, but when you looked at the numbers that Mikolas and Fedde were producing, you could live with it. And this was always going to be a season in which, hey, if those guys were out producing their underlying stats and the defense behind them was solid to produce ERAs in the mid-3s or low 4s, you were absolutely going to take it from these veteran starters who you were already paying, and you weren't in a position as an organization to go out and spend on additional free agents or trade for better options while you waited for the guys in the minors to be ready. I think one of them is ready in McGreevy, and the rest of them are still on the way. So that was a fine way to approach it for the first half of the season. But when it falls apart as spectacularly as it has fallen apart for Eric Fedde, there is no reason to have a 4th go in a row to see if it magically fixes itself for this pitcher.
And I don't know if the Cardinals are in that position of fooling themselves. They say, well, we don't have any starting pitching depth. Well, if you have McGreevy here, and then somebody goes down, you still have Steven Matt sitting in your bullpen. And it's not like the Cardinals have said, yeah, we're contending. You've been around this organization and John Mozeliak enough. Pretty much every year where the Cardinals are struggling, he'll say at the deadline or when they make a move, he'll say, well, hopefully we can surprise some people. He hasn't even said that since last October. He's not fooling himself to believe that the Cardinals are going to win 4 playoff rounds and win a World Series this year. So does it make a big difference to you? It does not to me. if the Cardinals make the playoffs and get knocked out in the wild card round in 2 games.
It does make a difference to me. I think more so than the opinion you're expressing, which is fair. But I do value the idea that the Cardinals could sneak into the playoffs and maybe win a series, a la what the Kansas City Royals did last year. And then suddenly you're talking about at least having a couple of home games in addition. And it wouldn't take very much for the Cardinals to do that, in my opinion, in a best 2 out of 3. You just have to have the offense firing at the right times. You maybe get a good start from Siani, a good start from Libby, and you might be able to sneak away with a wild card series, and then you're in a best of 5. I do think that there would be value to that, especially if you're going to get any home games at Busch Stadium, because it's been since October 2022 since we've had that. It didn't go well in that series, but there were moments of that series. I was just thinking over the weekend after Joel Pozo's big swing and then the massive pimp job that he did after the big swing, I was thinking, I haven't seen a great pimp job like that on a Cardinals home run since Juan Yepes in that October 2022 series against the Phillies. And like those are moments and memories that I think would be valuable to Cardinals fans, even to the Cardinals fans that say, I don't care if they get in, don't care if they barely miss. So I feel like when the burden is so low to just be better than what Fedde's been over the last 3 outings, you as John Mozeliak, I think it's incumbent upon him and his front office to make those little moves, which is simply right now, put him on the IL, whatever you have to do. McGreevy steps in. If McGreevy's not great, which, by the way, he might not be. He's also a pitch-to-contact guy, gave up 8 runs in Memphis on Sunday. I'm not saying it's going to go swimmingly for Michael McGreevy, but you at least owe it to the rest of the team and to the fans, in my opinion, to try something different when it's not working to the level that it's not working right now for Eric Fedde.
And at least Eric Fedde, who, by the way, happy birthday, or not Eric, happy birthday, Michael McGreevy. He's 25 today. McGreevy has a chance to get better. I just don't see a scenario in which Eric Fedde is going to get a whole lot better.
No, like I think the best case version of Fedde is like he comes back, figures out some things, eliminates maybe a pitch that's causing him trouble, or shies away from something that has just been untenable, and he can go back to being a guy who gives you 5, maybe 6, and he's kind of in that Mikolas tier where if he goes 5 1/3, giving up 3 runs, you said, hey, he kept you in the game, he gave you a chance. Right now, you've kind of got 40% of your rotation that you feel that way about, and neither Mikolas nor Fedde over their recent outings are accomplishing that. So you got to pick and choose one of them, I think, to at least for a temporary period, put him aside and let McGreevy have a shot at it.
Now, but Bernie's going to join us. Bernie Miklasz coming up in about 10 minutes or so. The Cardinals were 33-47, 35 years ago today when Hall of Fame manager Whitey Herzog resigned, and Bernie actually went out to San Diego. And there's some wild stories about Whitey's resignation. So Bernie's going to join us in about 10 minutes. So we've talked about the pitching and Fedde and Mikolas, and Mikolas and Fedde need to be gone, is what Jerry Frank says. There's no reason to have either of them start again. Mo may get rid of Fedde, but he will keep Mikolas for the rest of the year. Yeah, because who's going to give you innings? That's the thing. If you burn out your bullpen, and this is something we've said all year long, at least when Mikolas gave up the home runs the other day, he gave you 6 innings. If you have 2 guys that are giving you 2 innings and your bullpen 40% of the time has to give you 21 outs, your bullpen won't exist within the space of a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we saw the bullpen. I mean, Ollie was aggressive with pulling Fedde from the game, and the bullpen gave up a bunch too, which tells you like there's some guys in that room that are a little bit gassed, that are a little bit worn down, and so you can't necessarily add fuel to that fire and expect the team record to get any better.
Yeah, and this run from Eddie Grant, Fedde and Mikolas were doing fine until their last 2 or 3 starts. The problem nobody sees is that McGreevy can start, but he's not accustomed to throwing till the last day of September. Will he hold up? Matz needs to be a starter, though he is injury prone. He will give a great effort. And I think that this is an experience that Michael McGreevy needs to go through before he's on a team that's ready to win. You need to, in more cases than not, learn how to navigate September. And that's one of the other reasons that I would like to see Michael McGreevy here. Now, McGreevy did throw 173 innings last year. It's not like he's one of those guys that, we have to baby him and we got to stop him at 110 innings or something like that. He's a horse. And he might wind up being, like you say, a number 3 guy, but they need to find out about him. They need to find out about him at the major league level. And you're right. They have not seen him in September, and I want to see him in September.
Yeah, and I think they've done a pretty good job of managing the workload to this point as well, where he's only sitting at 91 innings between the big leagues and the minors. And there have been times where they stop him at 75 pitches in AAA because I do think they have that long-range vision in mind. I've always said from day one, Michael McGreevy will make at least 12 appearances for the Cardinals at the big league level this season. He's made 4 so far, and I still believe that you're going to get around 12 or 13 out of him because of the way that they have managed this. During the early portion of the season, while Mikolas and Fedde were producing, even if you didn't think it was going to last, the Cardinals were in a position where, we don't have a ton of depth behind McGreevy in the minors, so let's let this happen for the time being. Let's keep McGreevy kind of on that short leash where he's going to be built up enough to hopefully pitch down the stretch when we can be a little bit more aggressive, because there's still been no injury to the rotation for the big league Cardinals, and now you've got fewer months remaining on the calendar. You can be a little more aggressive and say, all right, if somebody like Fedde is struggling to this degree, we can set him aside and allow McGreevy to take that spot, and there's less calendar with which you could get into trouble because of other injuries. I think now's about the time, especially considering Fedde's performance recently.
Shots fired, by the way, by Nick Jensen, also saying Fedde and Mikolas are serviceable, quote unquote, is a horrible take. Yeah, 2 guys that won't be in baseball next year screams serviceable.
I don't agree with that comment at all. You're going to tell me that Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn weren't serviceable last year? Their numbers were exactly that, serviceable. And guess what? Neither of them are on a big league roster this year.
For an 83 win team.
Yeah, I mean, that's serviceable as a literal dictionary definition. I'm not I think people hear serviceable and they just get upset that we're not coming out with the pitchforks and angry about the production from these players. It's not sexy or exciting. The Cardinals came into the year owing Miles Mikolas way more money than he was worth, but that contract was already on the books. And as Randy has mentioned, he's a guy that's going to give you innings, to say nothing of the quality of those innings. He's going to be able to help save your bullpen at times as the number 5. That's not something he deserves a medal for, but it's just the nature of where the Cardinals are. Again, what happened at the end of last season, Randy, when the Cardinals announced Chaim Bloom, announced some of the changes they were making, there was also the tacit admission that we've done some things that weren't the best, and it's going to take a little bit of time to clear some of that off the books before we really get going again. They have enough, though, in the chamber that they're competing-ish right now, and that's maybe more than people thought, considering Mikolas has been a part of this. Fedde has been a part of this. The guys that fans are not excited about have been here the entire time this year, and yet they're still 5 games above 500 with some interesting pieces and parts that are going to have, hopefully, Chaim Bloom getting this thing up and running quicker than a 3-year rebuild that, I don't know, in February, I wasn't sure, and I don't think the Cardinals were sure whether they were a 3-year rebuild away from contending.
I don't think so either. And I think that next year, you get those pitchers on the runway that you have the hitters on the runway this year. And I think 2027 is your year. But I would think that you can really compete well for a playoff spot next year, because you'll know what you need offensively by the end of October.
Yes.
By the end of September this year, you'll know exactly what you need offensively. And if you need to go out and get it, you can, or otherwise people will have shown you what they're capable of. And then next year, you're going to have Gray, you're going to have Liberatore, you're going to have Palante, you're going to have McGreevy. One other guy is going to be in that rotation, probably somebody from within the organization, I would think. And if you didn't see it, J.J. Weatherholt got promoted to AAA. I would think he'll be competing for a major league job next spring. And that's exciting. That's another offensive element that they'll have. And then he can get on the runway. And I think the team will be headed towards real contention in 27.
And here's the part that's interesting about 2026 is even if you don't know going into the offseason what you need offensively, it's not laid out before you crystal clear, because Jordan Walker hasn't performed, but are they going to be ready to give up on him? Nolan Gorman has kind of performed. Are they still questioning his involvement, or do they decide to, even if it's not crystal clear, there's a new guy coming in that may not care as much about all the previous, clinging to prospects and players that we're not sure about. He's maybe going to be more decisive than Mozeliak, and he might trade some of those guys. And we may disagree or agree with the trades in the moment, but I think there will be more clarity if Chaim Bloom comes in and executes a couple of moves in the offseason that might hurt a little bit, because we might not know in the moment if they're going to be right or not. But he doesn't have all that baggage attached to these players, where I think he's going to be a little bit more willing than Mozeliak to make moves that would be considered bold, and then it'll maybe make the roster line up a little bit more sensibly.
And with some of the young bats, do you agree with me that, and obviously this is pending coming back from injury, and hopefully he's able to stay healthy, but the bat that was supposed to be Jordan Walker is Ivan Herrera?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It seems like that's working out. Nolan Gorman is back to having an 800 plus over the last couple of months, 800 plus OPS, 867 OPS in June, 798, I think, in his last 28 days. He has shown over the last 6 weeks or so that ability that he showed 2 years ago is still there. Wynn can play, Donovan can play. Questions about Noot, fair questions about Victor, questions about all the outfielders. And then Pages is going to be what he's going to be offensively. Maybe you move a guy like Weatherholt to the outfield. Maybe you move a guy like Herrera to the outfield. I would tell me this, and I go back. I'm kind of old school about positions. I like my corner guys to hit for power, and I know Weatherholt has an 800 plus OPA in the minors. I just don't see Weatherholt as a guy that has the oomph to be a corner outfielder or infielder for that matter. I see him more as and I think the Cardinals would have too many of those guys. I don't know how they're going to fit them all in, but I think the Cardinals would have too many of those guys if Weatherholt, Donovan, Wynn are all in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I would be
Scott, by the way.
And that's the thing too, is like Weatherholt maybe profiles offensively more like a center fielder, and he's a really good athlete. But you have high hopes for Victor Scott II at that position. This is not going to come off as a compliment today, but I could see Weatherholt's bat profiling similarly to Noot Bar's, but ideally you want more consistency than what Noot Bar is showing.
I don't disagree with that at all.
And I think if you did that, I would take that out of JJ Weatherholt. Again, I understand that Noot Bar's having a down season right now, and you're not getting that consistency. But yeah, and then with Walker, if he's still somebody you're giving an option to in right field, is he going to hit for enough power at this point in his career, or are you going to have to maybe reconsider the type of profile that his bat brings to the table? There are a lot of questions, and that's why I think Heimblum coming in and making like 2 trades, that's going to clear things up, and they might trade a guy you don't want him to trade, but I think there has to be one of those types of moves at some point so that you can do with some of these other players what I think they're going to do with Nolan Gorman the rest of the way is just play him. Because if you take the good with the bad, he may end up with a 750 OPS. He may end up with those 25 home runs. And then you go, oh, we just have to take the good with the bad with this player, and then we can get the most out of him. You can't find that out about all these guys at the same time.
Right. Jerry Franks, Gorman can have a good game, and then Ollie will sit him for 3. Noot Bar can go 0 for 4, and he plays him every day. Well, and that has not happened. That's one of the reasons that Gorman has been better over the course of the last 5 or 6 weeks.
He's played
because they are playing him. You're 100% right about April or May. And I think the stat was he played 3 or more games in a row 3 times in the first 2 months of the season. And then as of last week, he played 3 in a row. No, this was at the end of June. He played 3 in a row, like 7 or 8 times. Gorman had in June. So he was getting opportunity and taking advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, he got the day off in the final game against the Cubs, but otherwise before that, I think that was honestly just a day of rest, Randy, because he had started or had 3 or more plate appearances in pretty much every game since, I'm going all the way back to mid-June and until I find a day where he had sat out. So he's been playing every day. I think you have to kind of adjust your take on that, because it has happened that I think the Cardinals have realized, yep, we take the good with the bad with Gorman, and then we'll see how that plays out over 500 plate appearances this year, and that will maybe inform Heimblum on how he should handle that player in the offseason. Either he's proven enough to be part of the mixture for next year, whether it's at third base, second base, DH, what have you, or he's at least done enough that you can get something for him in a trade as they look to clear the deck for some other players. Lars Noot Bar, there's a lot of hate for Noot Bar. And again, his season stats are right around league average. I know he has not been the hitter that he had been in previous years, but I'm just looking over his last 10 games. Like, he's had a hit in 7 of them, 8 of them. Like, my opinion, he's not necessarily struggling to quite the degree that people feel, but they're looking at the very last game where he went 0 for 4 with 2 Ks. And so I understand it. He's not somebody that right now you want in the top half of the lineup by any means, but I still think with the bat to ball skills that he has, the batter's eye that he has, I still want to get him into the lineup when you can, but there's other players that you're trying to prioritize. So I understand.
All right. We want you to know about DraftKings Pick 6. It is so much fun. And if you haven't used it yet, you need to check it out. Use that promo code right there, STL Sports, when you download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, and you'll be locked into every pitch, every play. And that's why I've teamed up with DraftKings, because it gives you an all-new way to play daily fantasy sports. It really keeps you involved in the game. And if you play just $5 and use that promo code STL Sports, you'll get $50 in bonus picks, 10 extra picks to keep the action going all week long. Easy to start, fun to follow, and gives you a whole new way to stay connected to the game. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app today and use that code STL Sports when you sign up, only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
One of my favorite things to do in life is story time with Bernie Miklasz. And 35 years ago today, Brendan, Matthew Wilson, you don't remember this, but the Cardinals were 33-47. They were on the coast in San Diego. And Whitey Herzog, who had taken the Cardinals to a championship in 82, the World Series in 85, World Series in 87. And oh, by the way, they had the best record in the division in the strike season in 1981. Whitey Herzog had changed the franchise. And 82 was actually 81 was my introduction to really good quality baseball, because I didn't remember 67 or 68. Well, in 1980, Gussie Busch had brought Whitey Herzog to Grant's Farm and hired him as their manager. In 1990, Gussie had died in 89, so August Busch III was in charge, and there was a lot going on, and Bernie's right there with us. And Bernie, I thought of you when I saw this anniversary, because you did some unbelievable work at the Post-Dispatch, where they sent you down there and you got into the clubhouse and got the news. What a wild time that was. Can you kind of take us through the shock of that story? And you and Commish did an amazing job there.
You know, Randy, it's one of the reasons why I got into business, because of newspapering back in the day, because we were still in many ways the only primary outlet for like breaking news and all that stuff. Of course, radio was too, but I mean, there was no online journalism at that point, is what I'm trying to say. So it's 1990, and I'm just minding my own business, sitting at my desk in the Post-Dispatch, there on Tucker Boulevard, and I'm thinking ahead. Well, what am I going to write? You know, I don't have an idea right now. The Cardinals are in San Diego and yada, yada, yada. And so I get a phone call from the commish, Rick Hummel, and he said, Bud, Whitey Herzog just resigned. You might want to get out here if you can. You know how commish used to talk, you know, very polite. And I said, what? And so, yeah. And so I scrambled to get a flight and fly to San Diego. And I got there in time to talk to players before that night's game. And I couldn't believe the stuff I was hearing. You know, I had great sources, and some of them were on the record, like Tom Pagnazzi was one, talked about how we didn't deserve to have Whitey Herzog as a manager. And I asked him something along the lines of like, yeah, but were you guys bummed out a little bit that he didn't talk to the team after he made the decision to quit? And Pag said, we didn't deserve to get a goodbye from him. We let him down. We betrayed him. And so I went from there asking players about all the problems in the clubhouse. And as you guys remember, Whitey Herzog stepped down because he felt like he could no longer motivate the players to play their style of baseball, because the brewery flat out refused to even engage Vince Coleman, Terry Pendleton, Willie McGee in contract negotiations. And Whitey actually called Fred Kuhlman, and he said, look, can you at least talk to their agents? Because their agents will say, well, I did hear from the Cardinals. He said, at least maybe these guys will think that, hey, the Cardinals might still want me. And they're going to play the style of baseball that Whitey needed them to play, moving the runners over, hitting to the opposite field, giving yourself up for the good of the team. Rather than try to pull the ball and pad your stats, you would hit a ground ball to the right side to advance someone to third, that kind of thing. And I don't want to put everything on Coleman and Pendleton and McGee, because, and we all know Willie McGee's one of the most honorable Cardinals ever, but these guys also were thinking about what was to come next. And yeah, they're concerned about their individual stats. And yeah, that kind of planted the seeds of discord in the clubhouse, and there were just problems everywhere. I mean, the players didn't like each other. And and Whitey, there was all kinds of, disgruntlement. There was all kinds of just bad feelings where players were just sick of each other. And Whitey was like, I'm sick of all of them pretty much. I got to get out of here because I can't ask them to do the kind of job we need them to do to play winning baseball. And I think they were 14 games under 500 at the time. And they were terrible. They were a shell of themselves. This was 1990. So I'm making a tour of the clubhouse and talking to as many people as I could. And I'm getting, guys whispering stuff to me, and I'm taking notes. And some guys went off the record. I'm taking notes. And then everyone's looking around to see who I'm talking to. People knew I was, quote, up to no good. Actually, no, I was just trying to get the story of why, arguably, obviously one of the great managers in the history of the game is in the history of Cardinals baseball and the franchise architect, why he just up and left in early July of 1990. And I wrote a column about how there's a divided clubhouse, and, resentment was everywhere. Everyone was upset. No one cared. It was just, the team was just like ripped apart by some selfish concerns. And then the people who resented other players being selfish. And the only regret I had about writing that column, which was pretty controversial, is because I said, they've separated into cliques. You have black players on one side, you have the locker room, you have the white guys on the other side of the locker room. And, looking back on that, I should have phrased that differently, because I was not implying that there was some kind of racial conflict, but people took it that way. Mm-hmm. And that's my fault. That was not a good job by me. So I filed the column, and I thought the column overall was really, really strong because I told the truth. And then there's no internet that day, the Saturday morning when it came out in print at the Post-Dispatch. And so Mike Shannon heard about it, and he let me know. He said, "Big boy, I'm having that. I'm having that. You stirred it up. I'm having that column faxed out here so the boys can take a look at it." I said, "Okay, all right." And so the Cardinals had, all these faxed columns, faxed copies of that column, and they were just going nuts reading it. They were furious. I heard they were throwing things. They were calling me every name in the book and all this other stuff. So after Saturday night's game, because I didn't get down there before the game, and the clubhouse was closed for a long time. But after the game, so I got to go downstairs and let them have their say. And it was one of the, looking back on it, was one of the most incredible experiences of my career. This is Saturday night, the night after the column had appeared, the same day, but the night. And the players basically took turns. They like passed me around. I would talk to Terry. I would talk to Ozzie Smith, and then he would pass me along to Terry Pendleton, and then Terry Pendleton would pass me along to Coleman, and right on down the line. And then the pitchers got involved. Joe McGrain, of course, had to make a big show of it, like hollering at the clubhouse. And so I had about maybe 15 Cardinals screaming at me at one. At least they didn't do it at the same time. They took it like one-on-one basis, And but I didn't say a word. I let them have their say. I figured if they really wanted to talk about it, there would be a time we can sit down and talk about it. But one of the things I learned from my elders in the business, listen, if players are mad, you got to give them a chance to vent. You don't have to escalate it. Give them a chance to call you every name in the book, whatever they want to say. If you're going to write tough things, people are going to be upset. If they're controversial things, they're going to be upset. And you got to take your medicine. And so I did. And one of the things, I got two more things to say about this. And again, you wanted me to tell you the story. So here we go.
This is fantastic. I love it.
This is great.
So there two other things stood out. So every player to a man said, "I was wrong. I was making stuff up, yada, yada, yada. You're despicable. You're disgraceful. None of us will ever talk to you again." But I took it and I listened. And I noticed Terry Pendleton eyeing me again. And I loved Terry Pendleton. He was eyeing me again. This was after he had screamed at me, right? And so as I was starting to leave the clubhouse, he said, "Listen, I got one more thing to tell you, and come here. I got one more thing to tell you." And I'm like, "Oh, now what?" And he said, "You know what? We all hate your guts right now." And that was a crap. He didn't say crappy. He said that was a crappy piece. Mm-hmm. But I got to give you credit. You came in here like a man and you took the heat. And we respect that, even if we hate you right now. And I thought, what a nice thing for him to say, right? That was very classy. The other thing is the Cardinals get back home and I undergo round 2. I'm standing near the batting cage before a Monday night game, I believe. And Joe McGrain, who didn't like me for some reason, he's standing at the batting cage and he's saying all these horrible things about me, right? But he wouldn't say them to my face. He was saying it within earshot. I don't care, right? And then a couple other guys started in on me. Again, I don't care. If they want to have round 2, have round 2, right? I didn't say a word. I kind of smiled. So I'm standing there and I feel somebody like hit me in the back of my legs with a baseball bat, right? And I'm like, what the hell? What is this now? Is this now becoming like violent? I mean, really? I got hit in the back of the legs with a baseball bat and I turned around because I couldn't see. And it was Pedro Guerrero. And I really did think Randy and Schaeffer, I really did think for a minute, for like 10 seconds, Pedro Guerrero is like a dangerous man, basically, right? And is he going to just like start clubbing me with the baseball bat, like in broad daylight? And he hit me, and so he hit me again on the back of the legs, and then he pulled me close to him, and I said, "Uh-oh, I'm going to get punched." I wish I could use his exact language, but you can substitute. When I say bleep, you'll know what he said. He said, and I can't do his accent. He said, "Hey man, I just wanted to tell you something, man. Okay, I want to tell you something right now." And I went, "Oh gosh, this will be good." And he said, "Bleep these guys, bleep all of them, bleep these guys, bleep these blankety blank bleep guy." He said, "Brother, you wrote the truth. Every single word of that was true." He said, "So listen, man, bleep these guys." And then he walked away.
Isn't that awesome? That's what it's all about right there.
Right. And I had players, in the aftermath, they cooled down saying, "Yeah, that was pretty much spot on, but there was probably some things you could have done better." And I said, "Yeah, I know that." So anyway, that was the biggest adventure I had at that point as a columnist at the Post-Dispatch. And I had only been the sports columnist for basically a year because I became the sports columnist. I came back from Dallas. It was like in July of 1989. And this was,
later, yeah.
this was not quite the 1-year anniversary, but it was close. So yeah, I mean, that was a very memorable experience, but I remember feeling sad that, geez, the Whitey Herzog era is over. The Brewery obviously is not going to put money in the team. They're letting 3 of their best players walk away without even making a call to their agents. And it's just weird when you're standing there, like in the aftermath and, a couple days later, and you're like, this is the end. It's a very stormy, sad ending to a great era of Cardinals baseball. Like, the 80s, even though it was 1990, the 80s died. Whitey Herzog baseball died on that night in San Diego. It was officially declared dead. And that's why he walked away. He knew it. Because Whitey Herzog always knew best about everything before anyone else figured it out. So that's the story.
Yeah, it's great. And there's a couple of things, Schaeffer, that go into this. Number one, and Whitey talked about this subsequently. And by the way, Whitey never managed again. He was only 58 years old, and people figured, oh, he's going to come back somewhere, and he never did, although he almost took the Boston job one time. But Bernie, you'll remember this story. He told it. So he works a deal one-on-one with Willie, a 3-year, $8.7 million contract, and sends Willie McGee upstairs after a game and says, "Hey, Dal knows about this. Just go up and get it done." And Willie goes upstairs, and I guess he's got the paperwork that Whitey had filled out because Whitey was in charge of that stuff previously. And Dal Maxfield said, "We aren't signing you." It was kind of a Richard to him. And then later in the month on like July 25th, one of the nicest people in the world, Ricky Horton, gets cut, and Maxville brings him up to cut him, and he's a jerk to him. So the organization went from being one of the most fan-friendly, team-friendly, player-friendly organizations to an organization that was just so mean. And I remember they got mad at me, and so I was just getting started doing open line on a regular basis. I'd done it for a couple of years, and prior to me, I'm not taking any credit for this, but it had been Bob Burns and Bob Bragg and Bill Wilkerson and Bob Costas. And it was a different time, and people would call into Sports Open Line and say, hey, how about if we trade our 3 best minor leaguers for Mike Schmidt? And Bob Burns and Bob Bragg would say, well, where are you going to play him? It was, they were very organization friendly. And especially because of Terry Pendleton, I thought, and I said it on the air, I said, the way the Cardinals are treating Terry Pendleton is absolutely criminal. There's no way that this should be happening. And then obviously Willie gets traded, and Vince, and Ken Daly was a free agent too. Really,
right?
Not only good players, but high character, high quality individuals. And after every broadcast, when I would finish the open line, Jack Buck would sit in his driveway and listen to the end of it. He'd call up and say, I'd ask him how I did, and he'd say, were you fair? And I said, yeah, what do you think? He said, you're fair. And the problem was when Gussie died, August the 3rd took over, and August the 3rd didn't like baseball. And the Cardinals, from that point on, until the DeWitt family bought the franchise in 1996, the organization was checked out on winning.
No, there's no question about it. And, one of the things Whitey told me later on was that he wanted everyone to know that he did not resent the players who were about to become free agents, because he said, I couldn't look these guys in the eyes and tell them, listen, we got to save this season, and this team, needs you to hit the other way, and you're gonna have to sacrifice your batting average and make sacrifices for the greater good of the team. He said, I couldn't look them in the eye and demand that. I could ask them, but I couldn't demand it or bench them if I knew they weren't going to do it. Because he basically said, in so many words, he said Anheuser-Busch just had no interest in investing any money in all of them. And I don't blame them for being ticked off and thinking to themselves. So he wasn't mad at the players per se. It's just he found the situation to be intolerable. He can no longer lead the team. And that's why to this day, I will hear, and Randy, I know you do too, occasionally you will hear, not so much since Whitey has passed on, but I get tired about all this Whitey Herzog stuff. The guy's a quitter. No. Anheuser-Busch was the quitter. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they left, they put Whitey in an intolerable situation where he could not manage the team the way for them to be successful, the way they needed to play baseball. So I adamantly resent this description of Whitey Herzog as a quitter. He was anything but a quitter. But that was just a brutal situation to be in. And I got caught up in the vortex of it, but it helped me grow as a young columnist. The other thing you mentioned, August the 3rd, I made money in the Busch Stadium press box one night. We put a pool together. The Cardinals were having some gala on the field. They were honoring something. I don't know what it was. And they set up, the white chairs. I mean, it was a big crowd down on the field. And somebody said, Augie's coming to this, August the 30th. I said, he is? He says, yeah, he doesn't want to, but he's coming to this. So I got up an idea. I went to some media people and I said, all right, let's get a pool together. I got $10. All right. When does he leave? Like, when does he leave? Like, how long will he last sitting there squirming, with this bored look on his face where he can't wait to get out of there? So everyone would say, well, he'll probably go about 20 minutes. Some people said 30 minutes. I said, I don't mean to sound like a know-it-all, but I said, nah, he's good for about 10 minutes and he's out. And so that's exactly what happened. It might have been like 12 minutes. He was gone. He couldn't even take it. They're honoring their past and the franchise greatness. He couldn't sit there for half an hour and just listen to it. He's like, I'm out of here. And like, if you're looking back on that, anyone that thought that the Cardinals would be a competitive franchise under that leadership and ownership, from that point on, it hit me like a brick. This is over. They will never try to win with this guy in charge and his henchmen in charge. And there were some good people that the brewery did put down there to at least try to get some things done. Mark Lamping is a good example, but it was not only the end of an era for Whitey Herzog, but it was really the end of an era for Anheuser-Busch's ownership. It was only a matter of time before they would make it known that team was available for sale, because August the 3rd hated it. So that's why it's another reason why I defend Bill DeWitt. I know they could have done some things better here in recent years. No excuse for letting the farm system, player development system fall apart. But this franchise was in bad shape when Bill DeWitt and Drew Bauer and the Hansers and Stephen Brower and David Pratt and all those guys bought that team around Christmas of 1995. And, immediately returned them to the playoffs by hiring La Russa. They told Jocketty, get whatever Tony wants. We're gonna upgrade the payroll. We'll make trades. You do whatever you want that Tony thinks he needs to win right away. And so I think that's, people will ask me sometimes why I defend DeWitt, even though I've criticized him too. It's because it's called historical perspective. And frankly, I hate to be rude here, but some people are just utterly clueless. They have no knowledge of the past. Even with the bad stuff, even with the bad stuff baked in, the Cardinals, as of like right now, since he bought the team, are 3rd in regular season wins and 3rd in postseason wins.
It's amazing.
So yeah. Oh, but he's the devil.
Yeah.
He's the Satan himself. Tell the team, DeWitt, you're the worst owner we've ever had.
Yeah. Hey, Bernie, I will check out the screen here because I think I might have picked 35 minutes. This is what it was. Remember, it was the 100th anniversary of the franchise.
That's what it was. There you go.
And I think I might have gone 35 minutes, and I was like 25 over.
You had a lot of faith, apparently.
Yeah. So I know, but I had the binoculars on August the 3rd. I just watching his face, and he's all irritated by everything. He couldn't. Oh man, I tell you. So yeah, it was over. It was just a matter before they officially put the thing on sale.
That is a nice logo there. I do like that logo. Yeah. But with all that going on in the backdrop, Bernie, it's not difficult to understand what you mean by, Whitey. It almost means he had integrity to sort of know that it was over and that he wasn't going to be able to do what he was charged to do, rather than paint him as, oh, he quit. It's he knew what was going on in the backdrop. Again, I obviously wasn't there, but the way you describe it, that's sort of my impression.
Well, that's how I think that's well said, because I would totally agree with that. Whitey Herzog could have stayed there and collected money and put his feet up and said, well, it is what it is. No problem. They're paying me good money. What the heck? But no, he just wouldn't do that. And he also had pride. He took pride in being a winning manager and a guy who put a program together. He was the architect of the franchise. That's what made him different than any manager in Cardinals history who had success, with all due respect to Red and Billy Southworth and Tony La Russa. Again, he actually built the team that he managed, and he revived a franchise baseball-wise and attendance-wise was really in a rather terrible descent. And Whitey resurrected baseball in St. Louis. And
he made it for me. He made baseball for me. Cause the 70s were they had Hall of Famers on that team. They had Brock, they had Simmons, Keith Hernandez, borderline. They had, and the teams were around 500, they'd hang in there, but they weren't really exciting. And Whitey made baseball exciting for me. And obviously winning helps, but the way they played, and if Whitey were in his prime today, he'd be the smartest man in baseball. Doesn't matter what all the analytics are. He would be the smartest guy in baseball.
And, it's almost scary to think about him because he was the smartest guy in baseball. And this is before analytics, but he had his own version of analytics, as did Earl Weaver, and who I covered in Baltimore briefly. And they weren't called analytics, but Whitey had certain beliefs. I did a thing one day where I sat down, Randy and Schaeffer, where I was wondering about, was Whitey big into the platoon split advantages before? A lot of people, even in the 80s, didn't care all that much about it. They just disregarded. I went back and looked every year of Whitey's tenure in St. Louis, and I looked at the percentage of plate appearances they had where they had the platoon split advantage. And they were in the top of the leaderboard like every year. That's why he wanted switch hitters. So again, no one wanted to call it analytics or anything fancy. And from a technological standpoint, some of the information flow was very limited, to say the least. But Whitey wanted every morsel of information he could get to give him a competitive advantage. Now, I don't know that he would have gone all in with analytics, but believe me, knowing what I know of him and all my research and the way he put teams together and the way he managed games, there was absolutely an analytical aspect to it that was very strong.
This is unbelievable because during the pandemic, I was watching Game 7 of the 1982 World Series, and they show a wide shot, Cardinals and Brewers, and the Cardinal defense is shifted like it was 7 or 8 years ago. They had, and I think it was for Gorman Thomas, and maybe it was a left. I don't remember who the hitter was, but they had shifted, and they had the second baseman to the left side of second base. It was unbelievable.
That's awesome. Shift. So that's what I mean. Yeah. So that kind of goes in line with what I'm saying. The best time to talk to Whitey Herzog at Busch Stadium, was a couple, like 3.5 hours before the game, maybe even a little earlier than that, when you could get in there, and he would welcome me to come and others to sit down. And his best talk, I don't know how he could multitask this way, because he'd be telling stories and giving these great, thoughtful answers to questions.
And he's left-handed like this.
So he's got this big sheet of paper, not just notebook paper, good paper, and he's doing the spray charts, and it's color coded. And he's looking at last night's game. And so he's writing it in. He's like, okay, so he had color-coded information on spray charts that would inform, and he kept these spray charts on every hitter in the National League. So he could position his defense in an optimal way to get that player out, to take away where he likes to hit the ball. And again, we don't have to call it analytics, but that's basically analytics. But he did it by hand with colored pencils. He'd sharpen them. Oh, I need the red one. He'd sharpen it. Oh, I need the blue one. I need the green one. He'd sharpen it. He'd sit there for like an hour and a half, filling in these color-coded spray charts. I mean, come on. Yeah. The guy was ridiculous. When I say ridiculous, his brilliance was ridiculous.
Bernie, this has been awesome. This is, and I love to hear these stories. And this is a big one in Cardinal history, because, like you say, it changed the course of history, and you were boots on the ground for it. So we really appreciate you coming on for it.
No, it's a great story for me, and I was privileged that I had a chance to cover it and get in there early and dig out some pretty ugly stuff, but it had to be done. But I appreciate it. And listen, Randy, I'm going to tell you this again, embarrass the hell out of you, but I love coming on here to visit with you each week. You're a St. Louis institution, and it's just great to work with you again. And Schaefer, I love you too, man. So we have a good relationship as well. But Randy, anytime you want me to hop on to talk about something, you just have rock ask, man. I'm there. It's a pleasure and a privilege to work with you.
I enjoy it immensely as well, and we will do it again on Friday.
Take care.
All right, Bernard. Thank you. Love you. See you later. Miklasz.
That was something else, guys. I mean, the comments are going wild to have Bernie, who has seen it all, done it all, take you back to a moment 25 years ago, and kind of explain what went into all of that, and certainly for fans of a certain generation, just that is an era of Cardinals baseball that came to its conclusion with Whitey's resignation. If you missed any of that conversation, you're going to want to go back and make sure to relive it all, as Randy and Bernie, a lot of insight for that moment in Cardinals history.
Also, I think it's some interesting perspective at the end there, because we had a lot of people throughout the ramp up of Bernie's storytelling being like, yeah, that's the problem with the Cardinals now. This is just like now. And then Bernie kind of hit him over the head with a club at the last 5 minutes, where he was like, this is not comparable to today's day and age. And it's just, I thought that was hilarious. And I know there's a lot of fans out there who they will hear that story and they will probably think what people in the chat did. This sounds like the problems the Cardinals dealing with today. And I think the perspective is always the most important thing in a conversation, and Bernie's perspective as to this is what it was then, and I'm watching it now, and we can hear Bernie's videos, and you can watch his articles, and you can tell that Bernie's frustrated and doesn't agree with every move they make, but the perspective of the grass is not always greener, I thought was extremely important at the end of that story.
And just to give you a little bit of perspective here, and the statute of limitations has passed on this one, I'm sure. So, I mean, Jack Buck has been gone now for, 23 years? But Jack told me one time that he was at an event with August the 3rd, and they were at a bar waiting for drinks, talking about the Cardinals, and August the 3rd said, no goddamn baseball player is going to make more than I am. So that was his perspective. You know, beer was most important. He was referred to, and hey, there's a reason that AB did so well, but he was referred to just as a beer sniffer. He didn't really care about baseball, and you couldn't find somebody who cares more about baseball than Bill DeWitt Jr. So to make that comp is pretty outrageous. And hey, the Cardinals didn't want to pay those guys: McGee, Pendleton, Daly, Coleman, and that's why Ray Langford is a Cardinal Hall of Famer, why Bernard Gilkey should be a Cardinal Hall of Famer, why Brian Jordan. All those guys got their opportunities, and Todd Zeile was another one of those guys, because the brewery didn't want to pay that veteran team that had won so much.
Yeah, no, it seems like something that it would maybe be easy for some fans who, like me, were not around for that era to really know kind of everything that went into it, to look at the current era and say, oh yeah, it feels like, they don't have the same zeal for baseball. The comment I hear a lot is, oh, this ownership group just wants to try to sneak in and they just want to fill seats. And that's kind of the entire story of it. It is still a business at the end of the day. So I do believe they want to do those things, but I also believe there is a desire to win and to win at the highest level. But I think they also came to a point where they understood the way that they were doing that the last 2-3 years was not going to be replicable. They had to move in a different direction. That does feel like apples and oranges compared to just not really caring at all about the product.
I think they lost their way, clearly. I don't
no
think
doubt.
The desire to win was gone. I think the knowledge as to how to win.
The approach was
gone.
not right for the current era.
100%. But I always have trouble with this, and maybe somebody can help me with this. Okay, so their goal is to fill seats, but how do you fill seats when you're a sports franchise?
Win games. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that there has been this really common trope among fans. It's like they don't want to win the division. They want to just get a wild card, and that will be the way that they can keep the carrot dangling close enough to the faces of the fan base that, all right, when they show up for the wild card series and they'll show up for all the games because they're in the hunt, they're in the mix. It's like my belief is they would love nothing more than to be just dominating the NL Central, like many feel that they should be. But like we mentioned a moment ago, the approach to doing that in 2023, 4, and 5 versus doing it in 04, 05, 06 has changed significantly. And I do think they fell behind and have to figure out a way to rectify that from ownership on down.
Okay, we're gonna extend this, and we want you to weigh in because I've got a comp for you after we tell you about the Fenton Bar and Grill in Fenton, of course, on Rudder Road, just 2 minutes away from the St. Louis Soccer Park, and they just have an amazing lunch menu. Even like on a second alert weather day like today, you can head out. They've got a covered patio, and all the food is delicious. Try out their buffalo chicken salad. It is topped with crispy chicken strips dipped in their delicious buffalo sauce. They have shredded cheese, fresh red onion, delicious tomato, amazing croutons, and your choice of dressing. That's their buffalo chicken salad. And I told you last week, and you need to try this. It's new and it's exciting. It's the hottest thing they've got. It is the trash chicken sandwich, and they trash a chicken breast. It's super tender. They put it on a brioche bun. You can get all the fixings that you want on it. Have some tater tots with it, and you will absolutely love it. And don't forget, the reason that you go to the Fenton Bar and Grill is because it's the home of the trash swing. It's the greatest trash swing you will ever have. So stop by today and say hi to my friend Casey over there. Megan will be there, Jamie, and of course the maitre d' of the year in St. Louis in 2024, Chuck. You always want to say hi to Chuck. And when you go to the Fenton Bar and Grill and enjoy those trash swings, tell them Randy sent you. All right, Brenden. So we're talking about this, how the Cardinals, they don't want to pay their guys. Okay. They don't want to keep around. All they want to do is win a division. They don't really care about winning a World Series. And I had never put in perspective until somebody was talking about it yesterday. I wish I could think of who I was watching, but think about this. Alex Bregman Carlos Correa, George Springer, Justin Verlander, AJ Hinch, Dusty Baker. Does it really matter? Kyle Tucker. Does it really matter to the Astros who's on their team? They just win. And here are all these guys, and they have not replaced those players with expensive free agent acquisitions. And oh, by the way, Yordan Alvarez is out for them too. It was on PTI. It was on, pardon the interruption. All these guys leave the Astros, and they continue to dominate and be a team that people expect to represent the American League in the World Series. There is more than one way to skin a cat the way that the Yankees or the Dodgers do. And the Cardinals' approach now is very similar to what the Astros have been doing now for a decade. Now, you got to do it right. You've got to draft and develop correctly. But, man, if I would have told you 5 years ago that none of those names that I just mentioned would be on Houston, would you say, oh, yeah, they're in the hunt for the World Series again?
Yeah, I mean, they have really turned it on. They have a .604 winning percentage. They're running away with the AL West, and they're doing it with a different cast and crew. And, I mean, they trade Kyle Tucker to the Cubs in the offseason, and we think, oh, my gosh, that's one of their best hitters. In fact, it happened to the extent that Nolan Arenado didn't want to go there.
Yeah, right.
I mean, just to kind of recount that, if he had maybe accepted that trade to Houston, he would be playing right now for a team that would be leading the way. I don't know the degree to which he would have helped or hindered their performance. I think his numbers offensively would be far higher than what they are now with the Cardinals for A, the change of scenery reason, but B, the ballpark that he would be playing at and just mashing off of the Crawford boxes there in left field. Yeah, that is sort of one of the model organizations in baseball right now in the way that they go about things. I think you could make a comp to, maybe they haven't done it at quite the same level, but I think in the Cardinals' own division, the Brewers have done things very similarly, where at times they make unpopular decisions. They get rid of Josh Hader probably prematurely, probably cost them the division the year that they did it in 2022. But then they send away Devin Williams at the time that they think it's appropriate to do so. Like, there were moves that have been made by that organization, and they show up each year with a different bullpen where you've never heard of half the guys in it, and they find a way to be competitive in the division. And like I said, not quite to the extent that we've seen the Astros do it, but I do think there are a few organizations kind of following that model. I think the Cardinals are in the very early stages of getting back to something like that as the regime change happens, and as they kind of try to figure out how to exist and thrive in this current era of MLB.
In the chat during the Bernie interview, they didn't really stop talking about the rotation decisions that will or won't be made. But you guys got into it a little bit, but I just kind of want to touch on this again. Are you, because for me, I understand the initial reaction of, I want to see Fedde and Mikolas both out of rotation, but I do begrudgingly understand Mozeliak's point in his article with Katie Wu that because there's no organizational depth after McGreevy, that if you bring up McGreevy and you DFA Miles Mikolas to make this happen.
Yeah, I don't think you Fedde
is,
you can't get rid of both.
You can't get rid of both because there's not enough arms. No. And that's, I think people just like, there's people saying that Mozeliak refuses to cut Mikolas because he's stubborn. No, because he's being risk averse, because if they do that and then Palante or Liberatore or any of the starters get hurt, who's your fifth starter?
Exactly.
Now?
Right.
It's now you have to say, hey, Gordon Graceffo, by the way, I know we told you you're a reliever, but yeah, you're a starter now again, buddy. Sorry. Like, I understand the initial reaction from fans, but this is not a stubbornness move. This is not a Mozeliak doesn't care about winning move. This is a simply the pinch of injuries did not hit them in the major league level, but it did hit them consistently throughout April, May, and June in the minor league level, which means you're now having to look at the organizational depth. And I know it's bad. I know it's unfortunate, but it's the reality of the situation right now.
100%. And I said off the top, if Miles Mikolas is bad, at least he protects your bullpen. He gives you innings. And he even said after the game that, hey, if there is one redeeming aspect to the horrible start where he allowed the 6 home runs, at least I gave them some innings and was able to protect the bullpen. He gets that part of it. And hey, what you can do, we mentioned the name Zach Plesac before. Okay, so if things happen like Matthew just suggested, Brenden, like if you have your starting rotation is Gray, Liberatore, Palante, McGreevy, and Mikolas, and a guy gets hurt, you could plug in Matz, you can plug in somebody. But if you have both of those guys gone,
Yeah.
and you decide, okay, well, I'm going to bring up Quinn Matthews now. Well, what if Quinn Matthews is regularly giving you 2 innings and walking a bunch of people and you have to take him out?
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, what he's been doing.
Right. You can't, I think people know the prospects' names in 2025 because they follow it. Cardinals fans are knowledgeable, but knowing their name doesn't mean they're ready to join a big league rotation. In the case of Matthews, in the case of Tekoa Roby, certainly in the case of Tink Hence, like those guys aren't ready and they're not going to be in 2025, in my opinion. So I have supported the whole way through what the Cardinals have done with these 2 pitchers because it was working. Now you have to approach it differently, in my opinion. You cannot have Eric Fedde make another start before the All-Star break. I think if you don't want it to be a permanent deal because you're very concerned about the depth behind your current crop of starters at the big league level, you put him on the injured list for 15 days and kind of kick the can down the road, and then you're a little bit closer to the All-Star, or pardon me, to the trade deadline, and maybe you can come up with something that happens on the cheap where you're not mortgaging your future in a major way to add to the present rotation. What if another team is making a deal which causes them on the 25th of July to DFA a starter who might actually fit decently for you, and then suddenly you've come into something, but until that happens, you're like, okay, Eric Fedde can be IL'd instead of, coming up with just DFA or release. I think that would be a reasonable approach. But no, I've never said you're going to do it with both. I didn't see the text from the Cardinals yesterday that talked about the alignment of the rotation this week. I didn't think anything of it. I thought, yeah, Mikolas is going to start this week for sure. But for me, Fedde is the one that should not. And by the way, one other name that I'll bring up, and I haven't seen his stuff recently, but Curtis Taylor is a 29-year-old starter in AAA. Like, there are guys that you could throw into the fire if push came to shove, which is why I would be making the one move. It is time for McGreevy to at least get that look in the rotation, not because I think he's going to come in and be the savior, but because of the combination of how poor Fedde has been doing, how unsustainable his every 5th day role right now is for what the bullpen has to do to cover for him, and for what you need probably in McGreevy's development. I think the calendar changes this conversation compared to if we were having it in April.
100% agree. And just the fact that they don't owe a guy as much makes a difference. By the way, a lot of excitement about Tekoa Roby. In Tekoa Roby's professional career, he has started 6 games, or pitched in 6 games, 22 games, 14, 10, and then 15. He has never participated in more than 22 games in a season. And since his second year in pro baseball, this is his most. So I think that you need to see Tekoa Roby show a little bit of durability before you bring him up.
Yeah, 2026, I really feel like you could see a Tekoa Roby debut, but I want to see him under just normal circumstances get through the remainder of this season, build his arm up to the extent that next year, when you're talking about how great his stuff looks, you can actually envision him coming up, and then if it's going well, staying up and not having to worry about workload or durability concerns.
Eric Cleveland, figure it out. You can't continue to run out Fedde and Miles. What does that say to the fans and the other guys on the big league roster?
Totally.
What have the Cardinals told you since last October? What are you thinking is going to come of this season? Now, we both agree that you can't keep sending both of these guys out there, but Mikolas at least gives you innings. But if you don't have Fedde, you don't have Mikolas, then, okay, you put McGreevy in, and then who is your 5th starter? Are you going to try to plug in Matz, where you'll take a hit in your bullpen? Are you going to try to bring up a Zach Plesac or a Curtis Taylor? I believe that, as rough as it is with Mikolas, and Mikolas has struggled, but at least he gives you innings. As rough as it is with him, I'm not so sure that the alternatives are going to be an awful lot better.
No, and like, again, McGreevy could come up and give up 5 runs an outing, give up 5 runs over 5 innings. Like, he's pitched to contact. He has some of the same characteristics as players that the Cardinals have been watching for recent years, and they're not too enamored with. I'm not saying that McGreevy is going to come up and not thrive. I think he's a really solid middle of the rotation guy for the next few years for the Cardinals. But if you're expecting just instantly like an ace is going to come walking through the door, McGreevy's got a 4.2 ERA. Prior to 3 starts ago, Fedde's was 3.5. That is just the stats. I'm not, there's no narratives involved in this. It's just the numbers. And so you could get some similar production from McGreevy, but you might as well do that at this point where what Fedde is giving you is not sustainable. And McGreevy is going to be around next year and beyond.
And one thing, Matthew, and I know you've got a comment here, but some people, and what makes some of the great ones great is they have the stamina to handle an entire season. And Karraker Fedde just hasn't shown that stamina. And there is a wall that he hits during major league seasons. And I believe that this year he's hit that wall. And I don't know if there's an amount of rest that will allow him to rebound and be what he was before this stretch. But some guys just can't do it for a whole season. Matthew, what do you got?
Graham says maybe it wouldn't feel so bad if the messaging wasn't runway, reset, runway, all offseason spring training. And here's the thing. If not Jerpy, sorry, who's the Takora Roby. If Takora Roby had killed it at AAA this year after he got moved up from AA, then he might be in the conversation. But he went from a 3.5 ERA in AA to a 5 ERA in AAA when he got moved up this year. So Takora Roby isn't going to then get pushed up to the majors.
So
if Quinn Matthews hadn't gotten injured, maybe he'd be blitzing through AA and AAA right now, and he'd be an option. But he got injured,
and
which means that the runway wasn't there for him to happen. Like the reality, the projection is one thing, the reality is another.
So
right now we're in the midst of the reality.
My question for this question, I'm going to respond with a question. Would you have preferred to have the Cardinals tell you all off season, yeah, we're trying to win the World Series. We think we can win the World Series with this group of guys that we have. We're going to sign one free agent, Phil Maton. We're going to let the young guys play. But we think we're going to win the World Series. Is that the sort of messaging that you wanted? I appreciated the honesty because the Cardinals haven't always been really honest when they signed Lynn and Gray and Kyle Gibson last year and said, we're going to try to take a shot at winning a World Series. Or when they make moves on a 71-win team, and granted, they sold with that team, but they try to improve a 71-win team with those three and try to win 95 and get to a World Series. That's not, I'm aware enough so that I realize that that's not a group of players that you're going to win with. So what would you rather have? Would you rather have be told, okay, we're probably not going to win this year, but we're building for the future and you'll be able to see this team grow? Or would you rather be told, gaslighted a little bit, I guess, yeah, we're trying to win the World Series?
I think if you're looking at this with proper context, the messaging that they've given all along has made a lot of sense. Like there's cognitive dissonance, I feel like, from the fans who say, well, you told us it was runway. Why is Mikolas in the rotation? Like that doesn't consider any of the context of what they're dealing with as a major league roster, what they're dealing with as a payroll, what they're dealing with as the trades that they tried to make to potentially free up spots. Runway was largely about the younger to, I'm going to say middle-aged career guys, like in age 25, 26, 27 guys that they know are ready for opportunity, to have opportunity largely on the position player side, but it's selective runway because Liberatore fits into that boat as well. He needs to be getting runway from a rotation standpoint. And so he's gotten that, but there's something else at play when it comes to a pitching staff. You are going to lose 3 or 4 starters throughout a year. Look at every other team in baseball. The Cardinals haven't had that. It would look so different at this point if the Cardinals had like the standard requisite 2 starting pitching injuries, even if it's just like for 15-day spells between April 1st and today, because we would have seen 4 additional starts from Michael McGreevy, and we would have seen, what it would look like for some of that depth to be more deployed. And that's the guy that I think is circled when people say, well, they're not giving runway because McGreevy hasn't played. If we go a full season and McGreevy doesn't pitch 12 times for the Cardinals, then I'll agree that they kind of bungled that to an extent. But you can also understand how it happens because they're the only team that hasn't had starting pitching injuries. They to their credit, they baked in for the appropriate amount of depth that they had. Why they kept a Mikolas, kept a Fedde, and until 3 weeks ago, those guys had ERAs at 3.5 or 4. So you weren't looking at it and saying, pining for some of these guys from the minors who aren't ready anyway. Like they handled it appropriately. On the offensive side, why runway hasn't played out to the way some fans think it should have is they couldn't trade Nolan Arenado because Mozeliak said, can you give me a list of teams you'll go to? And he did. And then when Mozeliak traded him to one of those teams, he said no, which meant Nolan Gorman's not going to play every day. And Alec Burleson's not going to play every day. You're going to have moments throughout a season where we give this guy runway, but it doesn't mean that he plays every day for 3 months. It means he plays every day for 3 weeks. And then the next guy is going to try to take a turn based on pitching matchups, based on a lot of other factors, based on player health. They have done, in my opinion, a pretty good job managing and massaging runway in a year where they have been really damn healthy up until recently on the position player side.
Eric Cleveland, Randy, bottom line, Miles' contract was another bad contract handed out by Mo. I'm not going to.
Nobody is disagreeing with that.
No.
Not even in February would anybody have disagreed with that. But it's what you had. It's
Yep.
the hand that you were dealt. Now, you may have dealt it yourself, Mo, but that's the hand you had. And so it's the hand that they have played. I think there would have been, cheering and celebrating in the streets if in February they had said, Miles is a bad contract, DFA. Eric Fedde, we don't really think he's going to be able to hold up, DFA. And people would have said, yes, this is what we wanted. And then you would have had McGreevy in the rotation and Matz in the rotation, and you wouldn't have had a McGreevy and a Matz to come in and help you as a sixth man for 5 or 6 or 7 times throughout the year. And so those starters who have gotten the benefit of going every 6th day on occasion instead of every 5th, 1 or 2 of them are probably hurt, and you would have had nobody to take their spots. I understand it's not sexy. I believe the Cardinals have handled it largely appropriately up until this moment. It is now time to approach it differently because the calendar and the performance of Eric Fedde tells you to, and we will see what happens this weekend. Will it be Fedde or will it be Michael McGreevy? And that will dictate how I feel about it.
Yeah, and I hate to parrot you, but Brenden, I agree with you 100% because it's, as Tony La Russa used to say, you can bring up a young pitcher and you can break them. And one of the things the Cardinals have done is they brought up people like Alex Reyes too soon, Flaherty. They put him on that pedestal too soon, and I don't think it benefited those guys. They're waiting to season these guys and get them here so that when they get here, they're prepared to help the Cardinals win. Remember, who was the big right-hander, big Cuban right-hander that they had a few years ago that he kept losing and losing?
Johan Oviedo.
Oviedo, there you go. You don't want to do that to players, to pitchers.
He had to eat it in the COVID season, man. He was
did.
not ready, and they had to throw somebody, and you do not want your prospects in that situation if it can at all be avoided. I mean, that is really well said.
Yeah. So you just don't want to break them. Matthew, do you have anything else to do? I didn't know if Matthew wanted to add anything. We do have Cards Central 365 coming up pre and post today before the Cardinals take on and after the Cardinals take on the Washington Nationals. One of the great moments in baseball history was when they messed up the Nationals jersey for a player. It might have been Ryan Zimmerman, and they forgot the it's an N-A-T-I-N-A. They forgot the O. N-A-T-I
Nationals.
N-A-L, yeah, Washington Nationals. So I've called them that ever since. So you can check it out after every game and before every game here on STL Sports Central.
One other thing that we hadn't got to talk about that was also in that Katie Wu article was Mo talking about their struggles against the left-handed pitching. And his take was it knowing they get Herrera back, Nolan healthy, and Wilson 100% healthy.
That's going to be their trade deadline.
I do feel like they're going to be in a week or two. It's not a I do feel like we are going to be in a week or two. It's not as a glaring hole in terms of trade deadline thoughts. So for all the people who want that right-handed bat, yeah, to your point, the cliche, kind of like making a trade, getting a bunch of these right-handed bats back healthy.
Well, give me a right-handed bat that's rumored to be available.
You want to say the name or should I?
Go. You have one?
No, I don't have one. I
Oh.
just thought you do.
No, I think we're going to really start to hear names kind of thrown about over the next few weeks.
Okay.
Whatever his name is.
Luis Roberts, the one that everyone wants to talk about.
I-
Over for like what are we on six years now?
serious?
We on year 6 of wanting to trade for Luis Roberts.
Here's why. First of all, Luis Roberts should be traded. He should be rescued from Chicago, but he should be rescued from himself. His OPS is about as low as Jordan Walker's OPS this year. He has been, downright abysmal, but you see what he's done in previous years and wonder if a new organization can maybe get that out of him. The reason I would be intrigued is because there is previous upside, and I would have to imagine that he's performed so poorly that the White Sox would probably eat some money remaining on his deal in order to facilitate it, but I'm not really eager to give up prospects for Luis Roberts.
And my presumption is that people would like to have the Cardinals get a right-handed bat to help them win
Right.
in 2025.
Yeah, I think the bat would have to be somebody that is also under team control for next year, which Luis Robert is, but it's at a dollar amount that is sort of prohibitive unless the White Sox are eating a healthy chunk of money because whatever, he's cancerous to the clubhouse. I have no idea, but like his numbers sort of tell the tale that he's hitting 185, but still has found time to steal 22 bases. I think he's just out there just anytime he does get on bases, like I'm running for me. I want to see how many steals I can rack up, like
To your
that sort of
point,
vibe.
Like Eric Cleveland throws out a Brent Rooker. My thing with that is
You're paying things.
they're not getting $12 million for the next 4 years, I think, for Rooker that is locked in.
And
they're not adding.
They want him to be a centerpiece for the move to Vegas. That's why they signed him to the
They're not
extension.
trading him for for what.
No,
gonna
you're
trade
giving up.
anyway.
You're giving up significant prospects for that move in a year where you're basically saying we could have a chance to contend and succeed, but we don't want to give up and mortgage our future to do it. I don't think Cardinals fans that are clamoring for Brent Rooker are going to be too excited when it's Quinn Matthews and other significant names that are going the other direction to do it. I mean, that becomes wait a minute, what happened to our future pitching? Yeah, that's why they kind of have to hang on to some of those guys. If they make a move, Randy, for a right-handed bat, which as Rock pointed out from the recent article from Katie in The Athletic, doesn't sound like they're going to do. If they were to do that, it's for like you're trading spare parts that other teams could maybe find an interest in, and you're not getting a huge name. You're just trying to plug a hole.
So you're getting Tommy Pham.
You're getting this year's Tommy Pham, which I don't think behooves a Cardinals team that already, when fully healthy, which in February, theoretically, they will be, you're saying there's not enough spots to play all these guys. So unless it's just now a name that people bring up, and I'll be curious for your thought on this, Randy, is Nathan Church. Now he's not he's a left-handed bat, which is, sort of exactly what everybody else is in the lineup right now. And we're talking about right-handed bats that can help you against left-handed pitching. So he would not be that. But if he's a guy at AAA that has good numbers and you see he's blocked, I'd trade a guy like him if I could come up with somebody that's controllable for this year and next, and maybe fits the roster a little bit better, like a right-handed Nathan Church. Nothing on the guy, but like maybe organizational need comes into play there. But that's not a guy that you consider a prospect that you're counting on as part of your future. Would you trade Thomas to JC if there was somebody that could be locked in for a few years? I would. But I don't know that those deals are going to come about, and I don't think the Cardinals are pursuing them.
Max Muncy is still on the IL. The one hope that you might, and he's got a bruised knee. I guess the one hope that you can have is that the Dodgers would have interest in Arenado, and you are going to have a tremendous amount of redundancy coming up with Church and Davis on the way to join the four left-handed bats that are already here.
JJ Weatherholt, I'm going to throw his name in there because he could be in the outfield too.
Those three are on the way to join the four. Obviously, Donovan, Gorman, Noot, Burleson. So you are going to have a tremendous amount of left-handed redundancy that you're going to have to, at some point, turn around, and you're going to have a right-handed hitter. Maybe at some point you trade like the left-handed Alec Burleson for the right-handed version of Alec Burleson. I don't know if that's out there, but that's what you're looking.
I think we've been saying that for 3 years, and the Cardinals have not figured out a way to do it. And so we'll see if at some point that comes along. I think it's certainly fair to wonder about, but yeah, that's why I think we've seen the stagnation, and we've seen the guys that they have cycled through, like Ryan Vilade and Jose Barrero and now Garrett Hampson, is because they don't have those right-handed bats available. Is it because there were opportunities to get those trades done, but they just weren't sure which lefty bat to trade, and they had that sort of take lock? Maybe, but that's why I say there is a new guy coming in at the end of the year that's maybe not going to have the same approach to these players, because he might like the players, but they're not his players, and he might be a little bit more free to be decisive in how he approaches it. I'm not saying Chaim will get all the trades right, but I think he'll be more willing to make a couple of them when push comes to shove. All
right, I want to touch on one other thing here in our last 10 or 15 minutes, and we've all been following. I know you've been reading about the Luiz Ortiz situation under investigation by MLB for gambling allegations. And it's really interesting. A betting integrity firm called IC360 sent an alert in June to sports book operators. So they sent them to DraftKings and FanDuel and all of those regarding Ortiz. And MLB has placed him on non-disciplinary paid leave through July 17th. So he's still got 9 days. But here's his first. This was to Randy Arozarena back on June 15th.
Well, that
was
one's Pajes.
first pitch.
Yeah.
This is the Arozarena pitch. Slider, one of his worst of the year. Now, you can bet, obviously, on first pitch to a hitter, whether it's going to be a ball or a strike or hit the batter. And this pitch was a horrifically bad pitch by Ortiz to Arozarena. And then a couple of weeks later against the Cardinals, Pajes is at the plate, and he throws his worst slider of the year, first pitch to Pajes. And that's why he was flagged with the first pitch slider to Arozarena, the first pitch slider to Pajes, that were among his two worst sliders of the year. Do you think that's enough? Do the two pitches show you enough because they were his worst pitches of the year?
So when combined with what I understand about this is there was an irregular maybe betting log on those particular
Yes,
moments
there
compared to if you looked at every other from other MLB games and probably from other pitches in this very game. You would look and say, okay, we didn't get the influx of bets on that's going to be a ball or a hit batter on those others, but it coincides, these two terrible pitches coinciding with what these sportsbook operators are saying, or at least one such operator would say, we got an influx of bets that was going to be a ball.
Yeah, we saw
that's where
unusual action.
that's where the alarm bells absolutely, in my opinion, do sound. It is an extremely bad look for if they say, yeah, we normally get about $2,500 in bets from 20 different people on average when it comes to that type of betting market. This one had, whether it was 50 different people and they bet a total of, 25,000 or whatever the numbers would be. If that coincided with what we saw on those two pitches, it doesn't look good. And very much no.
And by the way, these gambling integrity firms are unbelievable. What they're finding with football players that are in their locker rooms or in their team facilities that are gambling from there, things like this. Jonte Porter's unders, when he got caught, it looks like they're going to get another NBA player. It really is remarkable how the details of the sports are, every single detail is eyed by these integrity firms. And then it starts with, okay, what sort of action is taking place on this guy? Is there an unusual amount of action? And then how is he performing relative to that action?
Yeah, when it's such a unique market as well, like ball or strike of the first pitch of an inning feels like pretty niche in my opinion. And so that would be one where if you are doing some, shady stuff where you're involved in knowing that, hey, such and such, my buddy is gonna bet on that moment, just make sure I throw a ball and then it works out. Like that would obviously be the implication. I don't know for sure that that's what happened, but that's why it's being investigated, because it very looks like that could have been what happens. Yeah, when it's such a niche market, you can't exactly hide. Like point shaving has been, talked about and going on for decades. But when it's a case of like, oh, one guy happens to miss a 3-pointer instead of make it, so his team loses by, 10 instead of 7 at the end of a game, and the spread was 8.5. Like that's one of those things that you could just say, oh, he missed the shot. What are you going to do? And it's a little bit harder to identify. When it's so niche like this one, it makes perfect sense why it would have been flagged. It's very obvious that there might have been something going on when it's such a Normally, I can't imagine there is just a bunch of money being bet on, is it going to throw a ball or a strike to a particular batter to begin an inning?
Samuel Howe, our number one commenter, throw a ball or else.
Yeah, you hate to imagine what the implications are behind the scenes of, okay, we know this looks fishy, but what actually happened? Were there 5 buddies of this guy that got together and said, yeah, we're going to bet on this particular moment, and then they're able to identify, based on their names and their histories of their accounts that they know Luiz Ortiz personally? Like that's the stuff that would have to be looked into and investigated. And I think more will come out about it as time goes along. But like I said, on the surface, not knowing anything for sure, it doesn't look good, because you could paint a picture of what those implications might have been.
All right. Brenden, one of the things that you and I do very well on this show, and Matthew is very strong at this too, is we hold people accountable. I mean,
sure.
if they aren't living up to our expectations, we hold people accountable. And Eddie Money loved your concert. He chats in and says, the Nationals took accountability this weekend. They fired people. Why can't the Cardinals do this? Do they know what accountability means? Eddie, John Mozeliak will not be back next year. I'm telling you right now, I am not going to allow them.
Me either.
To bring him back. We are going to hold people accountable, and we're getting rid of people. Okay. So John Mozeliak, take it. You heard it here
Your
first.
days are numbered, pal.
Yeah, he's out after this season.
Why does it bother people so much that like Mozeliak didn't just get fired or step away? Is it because they just needed the blood? They just needed the bloodshed and the retribution for their years of patience that were unrewarded. It's not instantaneous. Like that announcement came last year, like he's gone in 12 months, and that still has not been enough for people.
It's because when 20 years later from this day, when they try to explain to somebody that John Mozeliak ruined the Cardinals, and somebody says, yeah, but I have all these facts and figures that say he didn't, they want to be able to go, but they had to fire him at the end.
Yeah, and they didn't fire him.
That's what they want.
He always was going to leave on his own terms, and that's what bothers people about it. What's funny, though, is that people think, they're like, I think the Cardinals lost 5 games last week. Heads need to roll now. They need to make changes right now. It's like, dude, they announced the change 8 months ago. Like, it's happening. You just you got to understand that this type of season was always going to operate a little bit differently. It's okay not to like it too, by the way. It's okay also to say Miles Mikolas felt mildly happy that he was able to go 6 innings. You can, as a Cardinals fan, say, F that. That's so stupid. He gave up a record home runs. And I'll be like, yeah, you're right. That's fair. But like, we're going to still provide the context of why to a bullpen that might mean something, why that might matter. Be mad about the things you're mad about. But when we tell you, hey, there's no bloodshed going to come from this week of not scoring any runs, we're just painting a picture of reality at that point.
But you do agree that OPS is a dumb stat, right?
OPS
Or
is
OPS plus,
literally OPS plus is literally as good of a stat unless you want to go weighted runs created plus, but then you're also getting into the weeds a little bit because people go, what's that? It could not be a more valuable stat to say, do you get on base? Do you hit for power? Okay, smash those things together and then compare it to the league average, and then you know if a guy's doing good or if he's not doing good. It literally couldn't be for like the simple stats that we look to in baseball. I challenge anyone to find me a better one, because you're going to sit here and say, well, he's hitting 215. I don't care. Batting average is fundamentally useless in the grander conversation of what happens in a baseball game. You have to consider, if a guy walked 80 times, but he hit 215, don't you think you should talk about the other times that he got on base? Don't you think it matters how many of those hits for 215 went over the fence?
Off your shoulder.
I mean, there's nuance to it for sure. I would rather have a guy hitting 240 than 215, but there are other stats out there that I think are valuable. So yeah, that was an earlier conversation arguing about the merits of Lars Nootbaar. I feel like people think I love Lars Nootbaar because I always end up on the side of going, actually, he's been pretty fine for his career. People feel like when I say that I've announced his candidacy for the Hall of Fame. I'm not putting a red jacket on the guy, but he's been very, very fine for what he's been. And this year he's dropped off and probably needs to get back to the better plate discipline that he had to be the player that he's always been for 5 years, when he's been 12 to 15% above league average every year.
Now, that being said, I've been watching ball for a long time. I've never seen a runner score from second on a walk.
Oh, 100%. I don't think you can categorize it as being as valuable as a hit, but I want to see the guys that get on base. If you gave me the choice of a guy's going to have a 350 on base, is he going to do that with a 350 batting average and no walks in his life, or is he going to do that with a 210 batting average and 100 walks? I'm going to rather have it on the batting average, but it's a sliding scale of importance. And I also want to know how many doubles and triples and homers did the guy hit with that batting average, and that's how you tell if a player is doing any good or not. And also, OPS is valuable.
I don't care if my hitter is hitting 224 and 20 years ago that was a bad average. I care about relative to the rest of the league.
What's the league average right now?
What are my hitters currently doing in the way that the league is built now? Because my hitters are going up against pitchers, the same pitchers that everybody else in the league is going up against. They're facing the same. They're in the same ballparks everybody else is going up against. Acting like because 300 was the standard 20 years ago, it has to be the standard now, is ignoring just the way that the game has evolved. And you can having the opinion that the game is worse now is completely fine, but we're not talking about aesthetics. We're talking about as a evaluator, how do you compare players and how do you judge players? And the fact of the matter is, it's a solid way to judge.
245 is the league average batting average. So if a guy's hitting 245 in 2025, that means he's doing about what everybody else is doing.
But here's the thing, is there were people that think that Mike Trout was a better player than Albert Pujols because Mike Trout walked more. Well, no, Albert Pujols drove in runs because occasionally he would actually go outside the zone and get hits to drive in runs. And he understood from an early age, the key to this game is driving in runs and scoring runs. But
I love RBIs. I think it's wrong that there's a modern take of like, oh, RBIs aren't valuable. Well, they're not maybe predictive because it's kind of a clutch stat, but does it matter if you drove in runs? Ask any player whether they value RBIs. Like Nolan Arenado has always said, no, RBIs is probably about as important of a stat as you can have. It may not be predictive to the next time that you're due to get one, but it absolutely matters because scoring runs in the game of baseball is important. What these rate stats tend to do, though, is be a little bit more predictive into how many RBIs can you generally expect. But I'm one, Randy, and I wonder if you feel the same. I do believe that there are players and have been players over the course of the history of this game that are more clutch than the other players, that they get to situational hit because there is a guy on third base and I do need to at least hit a fly ball to the outfield. That's very real. That sometimes is not captured by pure OPS. And so there's room for both, in my opinion, but that's sort of something that can get lost in those conversations.
Speaking of things that get lost in this conversation, according to analytics, RBIs are just
luck. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that if that's your take.
That's not what analytics are telling you. All people are trying to tell you when they make statements like that is simply saying that a player doesn't control how many RBI chances they get across a season. That's all I think people are trying to do when they say that RBIs are luck, is that if you only have a chance to drive in 100 at bats, 100 runners in a year, and you drove in 70 of them, that's a pretty damn good season compared to a guy who only drove in 50% of the runs available.
Tell me when I get to a player that was lucky, okay?
Yeah.
Henry Aaron.
No.
Albert Pujols.
No, pretty good.
Babe Ruth.
A lot of skill.
Alex Rodriguez.
Maybe.
Cap Anson.
Yeah, no, I think so.
Barry Bonds.
Yeah, a little talent.
Lou Gehrig. Stan Musial.
He can swing it.
Ty Cobb. Jimmy Fox. Those are your top 10 RBI guys in history.
Gamers.
Where'd they hit? I have trouble finding guys here where I'm saying, oh man, he was really a lucky hitter.
But at the same time, Stan Musial's an incredible hitter. I don't think he got many RBIs other than home runs when there was nobody else on base in front of him.
Well, but some guys do a better job of hitting with runners on base than others.
I agree with
that.
that. I 100% agree with that.
Would you rather have the guy who drives in 70 RBI out of 100 chances, or the guy who drives in 100 RBI out of 250 chances?
What's the higher percentage?
The 70
exactly.
The 70 out of 100 is higher, but the guy with 100 RBI has more RBIs. My point is that's why the luck factor of do you have available RBIs is a thing.
To get the percentage, you do have to go to the next level of analytics to say, well, how many opportunities were there? And now it's a fraction because you've got a numerator and a denominator, and people are like, well, wait a minute,
I got problems.
That's analytics.
I got problems.
I just want to see how many RBIs the guy had. Well, you do have to factor in some more things. And again, OPS doesn't tell you who was on base when the certain things happened, but for a rate stat, it's pretty darn good. I'm a fan of OPS and by extension OPS plus, because I want to know how's he doing relative to everybody else. And by the way, Lars Nootbaars is currently like 690, so he's not doing quite good enough. Even though that's about league average, he should be better. If he's going to be 10 to 15% above league average, you're going to be a leadoff guy and going to be a top half of the lineup guy. Yeah, Lars Nootbaars is somebody that has to perform better than what he's done to the point in the season. I would still bet today that his OPS plus ends up being better than league average at the end of the year. That is still my belief because I've seen him do it for 4 years in a row. I think he can do it for a fifth.
Now, here's one. 1987 Willie McGee drove in 105 runs. And people complained all year because he only hit 245 with runners in scoring position. I'll take the 105 RBIs. If I can get 105 RBIs out of a guy, I'll take it. Would I like to have more? Absolutely. But if I get 105 RBIs out of a guy, even if he hits only 245 with runners in scoring position, those 105 RBIs will help me get to where I want to go to the playoffs.
I think that's probably true, but could you have had, now I'd have to look at the whole lineup to know, but if you had somebody else that had a better knack that season in Willie's batting spot in the order, if he was hitting 285 with RISP and had those same number of opportunities and drives in 125, you'd probably feel better about that total. So that's why just the raw total of 105, I don't think tells the full story.
Well, and the thing is, you don't know.
We don't.
That other person's going to.
We do not know because he didn't have the same number of opportunities as Willie. But that's why it's okay to go 105 RBIs. That's a good total. But you can still ask more questions and wonder more elements about, the way a lineup is constructed. I largely think lineup construction isn't that important relative to the amount of time we spend talking about it. But that's a whole other bag of worms. Can of worms.
People just are ignoring what the goal of analytics is. Mason Windu, analytics are great at telling us what happened. They can help with analyzing the future options and decisions. They don't predict the future very accurate, if at all. And there's not a single person who would tell you they predict the future. They're simply telling you the math tells you that you have a better chance of hitting the bullseye with 100 chances than with 10. That's all it's telling you is the math is saying that given 10,000 chances, this is the better way to handle it. But there's always going to be anomalies, which is why the football conversation always is very fun on Monday.
There are always small sample sizes when it comes, because even if something's happened 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 times, and you built up a data set over what that looks like, and therefore what you can kind of guess it'll look like over the next 500 times, Players get older, players change, players are working through different things with their swing, players approach one pitcher differently than they might a next pitcher. Like that's the inherently the nature of sports. We're never going to get it 100% correct, but like this is why sports talk can be really compelling.
It really can. And it has been. It's been great. I don't know if we have anything else left here on my list. Do we have anything else?
I think we do.
Anything else that is striking your fancy?
Anything you're mad about? Anybody? No, I'm good. I'm excited to see what the Cardinals do over this homestand. I'll be at Busch tonight. I'll be curious to see the way that the offense produces more than anything. They've got to be consistent.
I want to see what a team looks like that holds people accountable.
Well, me too.
So I'm looking forward to seeing those Washington Nationals.
There's a lot of reactions around STL Sports Central now because of Joe Roderick's hot take about Lars Noot yesterday. Do you want to weigh in on the return of Michael Siani, Brenden Schaeffer?
Michael Siani, I think, should already be on the team. I just don't think he should be in the everyday lineup. No, I would have him on the team over Garrett Hampson in a heartbeat because he's better defensively, and I don't really care about the left-right. If a guy's hitting 170, he's hitting 170. I would rather have Siani there available to come in and play good late-game defense, and in my opinion, he probably should have been here just about the entire time, but I don't think he would almost ever start in my lineup unless it was a very unique set of circumstances, and he certainly would not be starting over Lars Noot. Give me a break.
I am that's the thing. What you said, he wouldn't be starting. I can't get worked up over the 26th player on the roster. I really can't.
No, like it's very minor kind of differences, I think. But again, would you agree that Siani plays better defense than Hampson? I guess he can't play shortstop.
Yeah, he can't play shortstop. So.
But I don't really care because JC's on the roster, and so JC could play shortstop if Mason Wynn ever didn't start, which he's just going to play when he's healthy. So what do I care?
When the Cardinals are ready to win, Michael Siani is not going to be a part of it, and Garrett Hampson is not going to be a part of it. So,
interesting.
It is what it is. It's.
I'll agree with the Hampson. There's a realm in which Siani's still a 26-man candidate next year, but I wouldn't necessarily bank on it.
I wouldn't either. So, but it's always fun. It's fun having you guys and gals with us here on the Randy Karraker Show. Good to see you, brother.
Hey, good to be back and partying with you guys, talking about all the things we can argue about and riled up about. I enjoy it.
Yep. And thanks to our great friend Bernie Miklasz. If you missed the Bernie Miklasz conversation talking about the 35-year anniversary of Whitey Herzog's resignation as the manager of the Cardinals, just wild stuff. And actually, you know what? It's one of those things that's actually worth going to the library for. And I know that we aren't really a library group here, but
I love the library.
Yeah. But if you go and you can check out like the day after, that would be July 8th of
7th,
because the day after
of
1990. Bernie's columns were, and the commission did an amazing job. Check it all out. And we love having you here on STL Sports Central, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 10:02.